planning on planting a row of blackberries and a row of raspberries here in our small fruit garden, and so this year we're getting our planting site prepared. There's a few things that we need to consider when we select a planting site for brambles. The first thing is sun exposure. Blackberries are going to perform best in a site that receives full sun, but raspberries are a little less heat tolerant, and so in Oklahoma we want to look for a site that receives about 50% shade for those plants. We also need to consider air movement. Whenever we're planting fruits, we want to avoid areas that are very low because the cold air tends to settle there in the spring, and that can cause some frost damage on our plants. And the summer winds can also be brutal, so we want to look for a site that's protected from those dry summer winds. Now there's a very special consideration when we're planting brambles, and that's to avoid a disease problem. We want to look for a site where other brambles, strawberries, and solanaceous crops such as potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants have not been grown for many years. All of these plants harbor verticillium wilt, which can be devastating to our brambles. And the pathogen that causes this disease can remain active in the soil for many years. So even if you haven't planted tomatoes for 2 years, it's just not quite long enough. It's really best to find a completely clean site. Well, the next thing we want to consider is our soil. And you can see here that we've raised our bed, and what this is going to do is help improve drainage. We also cultivated deeply to loosen the soil, and we incorporated a large amount of organic matter. We used manure, and that's going to add a lot of nitrogen to our soil, really give our plants a good start. So we have a nice loose base to begin with. And our raised bed is a little over 3 feet wide. You want your beds to be at least 2.5 to 3 feet, and that's going to give the plants a large rooting area. They need at least a 3-foot rooting area to perform well. Another advantage to preparing our planting site ahead of time is to manage weeds. It's much easier to remove, especially those perennial weeds, when we don't have our plants in place. It also gives us time to conduct a soil test and adjust the pH as needed. The ideal pH is between 6 and 7. And the last thing we do when we prepare our site is to build trellises. Trailing blackberries and semi-erect or semi-trailing blackberries both require trellising to grow, and most raspberries also require trellises. The erect blackberries don't necessarily require trellises, but with the strong Oklahoma winds, it's certainly a good idea because that'll help prevent them from tipping over and breaking. So we're going to be growing both erect and semi-erect blackberries, and we're going to use a T-bar style trellis to support them. The posts are constructed from an 8-foot length of 4x4, and we use cedar because it's very durable. We started by cutting a 2-foot section off of the wood and set the remaining 6-foot section into the ground about 2.5 feet deep. We want around 4 feet to extend above ground. Next, we attached the 2-foot section to the post using a carriage bolt. The 2-foot section should be between 3 and 4 feet off of the ground, and we're going to attach our wires to that. You want to adjust the number of posts according to the length of your planting bed. Our bed is 24 feet long, and so we've used 3 posts set 12 feet apart. You don't want your posts to be any more than 20 feet because then they will not support the weight of the berries, and closer spacing is probably a little bit better. And I'm going to bring on my helper, Kenneth White, to show how this is built. Next, we attach the support wire. You want a nice heavy wire. We're using 12 gauge. And the wire needs to be attached securely, but allow a little bit of give. It's also going to stretch over time, so each spring we're going to need to tighten it a little bit. You can attach it to the posts using staples, or what we're using is a device called a wire vise. And what this does is it allows the wire to pass through in one direction only. So once you put the wire through, you can't pull it back out, and that holds the tension. Now it's easiest if you pass the wire through. What we did is we put holes through the posts. If you put the wire through first and then go ahead and slide the vise on, it's just easier to feed it through. And as you see, we could pull this through, but I can't pull it back in the other direction. We're just going to secure this on with screws. This wire vise will make it very easy to pull our wire tight next spring. We're going to put another wire on the other side and then our trellis will be ready. We'll be back here in early March to get our berries in the ground. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Oklahoma Gardening.